The room was filled with soft chatter, a warm mix of voices that bounced off the old wooden walls. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long, lazy beams across the floor. People were gathering for a small community event, something informal but lively, where friends and neighbors came together. In one corner, an old upright piano stood quietly, its polished surface gleaming faintly. No one paid it much attention, except for a few curious glances. It seemed almost forgotten, just a part of the room, waiting for someone to notice it. She stood near the piano, her hands lightly folded in front of her, trying not to draw attention. She wasn't here to perform or to be noticed. She was just another person who had come to enjoy the gathering. But there was a pull in her chest, a familiar longing that she hadn't felt in a long time. The piano called to her quietly, the way it always did, whispering reminders of hours spent in empty practice rooms, of music flowing effortlessly from her fingers when no one was watching. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure if she should even consider sitting down. She had left that part of her life behind, or at least, that's what she told herself. Nearby, a group of people were laughing at something someone had said. One of them noticed her glance at the piano and nudged another, smirking. "Hey, why don't you play something for us? Just a simple tune," one of them called out, thinking it was a harmless joke. Everyone laughed lightly, assuming she didn't have much skill. The request was casual, playful, and meant to be fun. She felt a sudden heat rush to her cheeks. She shook her head slightly, trying to brush off the idea. She had not played in front of anyone for years, not like this. But the piano felt different somehow. It wasn't just wood and keys. It was familiar, comforting, alive. The gentle pull grew stronger. She stepped closer, each footfall seeming louder in her own ears. The chatter around her faded slightly, replaced by the hum of anticipation that only a small crowd gathered in a quiet room could create. She touched the keys softly, running her fingers over them without pressing down. The smooth surface felt like old friends welcoming her back. A quiet breath escaped her lips. Maybe she could play just a little, something simple, just to make the group smile. She looked around and saw eyes fixed on her, some curious, some doubtful, and some expectant. She tried to smile, nervous but composed, and sat on the worn piano bench. The piano felt alive beneath her fingers. She pressed down lightly on a few keys, testing their sound, feeling the vibrations travel up her arms. The first note lingered in the air, a single clear tone that made several heads turn. People shifted, realizing that maybe this would be more than a short, simple tune. She started with a familiar melody, something light and easy, as though to honor the request. Her fingers moved with care, but even in these first moments, there was a subtle grace, an unspoken depth that came from years of hidden practice. The melody floated through the room, gentle and inviting, and a hush fell over the small gathering. People who had been talking leaned closer, intrigued by the unexpected beauty of the notes. She played cautiously at first, letting herself feel the keys under her fingertips. The room seemed to hold its breath. With each note, she remembered the countless hours she had spent learning, practicing in secret, when her world was quieter and life was simpler. Those memories gave her courage. She began to let herself sink deeper into the music, her hands moving with confidence that surprised even her. The melody, simple as it was, began to flow naturally, carrying with it warmth and emotion that touched everyone in the room. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others watched her intently, captivated by the unexpected performance. A few people whispered to one another, astonished at how such a quiet, unassuming person could coax such rich sound from the piano. The notes danced around the room, filling it with a soft, comforting energy that made the air feel lighter. She felt a strange calm herself, a connection to the instrument and the space that she hadn't felt in years. Every key she pressed was a bridge between the past and the present, between the person she had been and the person she was now. The laughter and chatter that had filled the room moments ago were replaced with a focused, respectful silence. It was as if the piano had spoken for her, telling a story she hadn't found the words to express. As she continued, a faint smile appeared on her face. The nerves that had been gnawing at her chest began to fade. She realized that this simple tune was only the beginning. The music gave her confidence, and with it, the sense that she could do more than anyone expected. The crowd was no longer just a group of people at a community gathering. They were witnesses to a moment that felt intimate and profound, even if they didn't yet fully understand it. She felt herself letting go of hesitation, allowing her hands to guide the piano, to explore the sounds that had been waiting for her all these years. The simple tune started to expand naturally, taking on a life of its own. She added subtle variations, tiny flourishes that seemed to appear without thought, flowing directly from her fingers. The room seemed to respond to her, the sunlight catching on the polished keys, the walls reflecting the music back in a soft, warm echo. People's expressions changed from casual curiosity to awe and admiration. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The music spoke for her, telling a story of hidden talent, of passion that had never truly faded. She felt a thrill, a quiet joy in the realization that her gift had not diminished, that it was still very much alive. Time seemed to stretch, the minutes slipping by unnoticed. The simple tune, intended to be brief, was now a gentle journey, carrying subtle emotions and moments of beauty. She remembered the advice of old teachers and the encouragement of those rare people who had believed in her. Each note she played was a reminder of the dedication and love for music that had shaped her life in ways no one else could see. She felt a deep satisfaction in sharing even a fragment of that with the people in the room. As the final notes of the simple tune lingered in the air, she lifted her hands from the keys and took a quiet breath. The room was still, the silence almost sacred. Then, slowly, soft murmurs of appreciation began to ripple through the audience. Some clapped gently, others nodded in recognition, and a few whispered to their neighbors, clearly moved by what they had just heard. She felt a mix of relief and exhilaration, the strange combination of vulnerability and triumph that comes from revealing a hidden part of oneself. Her heart was still racing, but it was a good kind of excitement, the kind that comes from doing something true and meaningful for the first time in a long while. She felt seen, not just as another person in the room, but as someone who had something unique to offer. The simple tune, meant to be a small gesture, had become a bridge between her and the people around her, connecting them through the universal language of music. She realized that perhaps this was the start of something new, a chance to embrace her talent again, even in small, unexpected moments. The piano, once just an object in the corner, had become a companion, a friend that reminded her of who she truly was. She stood slowly, brushing her hands lightly over the keys one last time, a silent thank you to the instrument that had carried her through the moment. The crowd's attention remained, a mixture of admiration and surprise. They had expected a simple tune, something fleeting and forgettable, but they had been given a glimpse of something extraordinary. And in that quiet, simple room, with sunlight streaming through the windows and the soft warmth of human presence all around, she felt a deep, unspoken understanding that sometimes, even small moments can reveal the greatest parts of ourselves. She moved away from the piano bench, feeling a strange mix of excitement and fear. The sound of the notes still hummed in her ears, a soft echo that refused to leave her mind. People were still looking at her, some smiling, some whispering to each other, and some with wide eyes of surprise. She tried to gather herself, but the room felt different now, as if the energy of the music had changed the air itself. Her fingers itched to return to the keys, but she hesitated, unsure if she was ready to reveal more of what she could do. She thought about the years she had spent away from the piano. Life had not been kind, and she had set aside her music to focus on survival and responsibilities that seemed more pressing than passion. But deep down, music had never left her. It had been there in quiet moments, in dreams that came and went at night, in the small melodies that played in her mind when she thought no one was listening. She realized now how much she had missed it, how empty her days had felt without the sound of her own hands creating something beautiful. As she stood there, a few people approached her, their curiosity gentle and friendly. They asked if she had studied music, and she smiled softly, giving vague answers about past lessons and a love for the piano. They nodded, clearly impressed, but none of them expected what was hidden just beneath the surface. She felt a mix of pride and nervousness, knowing that even though she had played only a simple tune, there was so much more she could offer if she allowed herself to. Her mind wandered back to her early years. She had been drawn to the piano almost by instinct, her small fingers finding the keys as if they belonged there. Hours had passed in empty rooms, practicing scales and pieces that challenged her, guided by teachers who recognized her natural ability, but also demanded discipline and dedication. Music had been her escape, her companion, her way to express feelings she could not put into words. Yet over time, circumstances had pushed her away from the piano, forcing her to focus on the practical aspects of life instead of the artistry that had always called to her. Now, standing in front of the small crowd, she felt the familiar pull again, It was stronger than before, urging her to sit down once more, to let her fingers speak the stories she had carried silently for so long. She glanced at the piano, its keys gleaming in the sunlight, and for a moment, the memories of her past training came rushing back. The quiet discipline, the countless hours of repetition, the small victories and frustrations, all of it came flooding into her mind. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and walked back to the bench, feeling a sense of inevitability. This was where she belonged, at least for now. As she sat down, her hands hovered over the keys, and she allowed herself a moment to just feel. She didn't rush, didn't think about the crowd or what they expected. She closed her eyes briefly and let her memory guide her. The first notes she pressed were careful, gentle, almost hesitant. But soon, confidence began to build. The melody started to grow richer, more expressive, each note carrying a piece of her story, a fragment of emotion she had held inside for years. The crowd was quiet, sensing that this was more than just casual entertainment. She let herself expand beyond the simple tune she had begun with. Her hands moved faster now, guided by instinct and memory, creating harmonies that seemed to surprise even her. The music took on a life of its own, flowing freely, wrapping around the room in waves of sound that touched everyone present. Some of the listeners closed their eyes, swept away by the unexpected depth and beauty. Others watched, mesmerized, unable to look away from the fingers dancing across the keys. The piano was no longer just an object. It was a conduit, channeling years of hidden talent and untold emotion into something tangible. She remembered the moments of doubt and struggle she had faced, times when she had questioned whether she should continue pursuing music, when life had demanded she focus on survival rather than passion. Now, each note she played felt like a small victory over those doubts, a declaration that her talent and love for music had never truly been lost. The room seemed to respond to her, each chord resonating with the hearts of those listening. There was a quiet power in the way the sound filled the space, a gentle authority that commanded attention without demanding it. As the music continued, she began to experiment subtly, adding small flourishes and variations that revealed her creativity. She had always loved improvisation, the way it allowed her to explore emotions that words could not capture. Now, with the room as her audience, she let herself take risks, following the natural flow of her instincts. Each variation brought a new layer of depth, surprising the listeners and even herself. The simple tune had transformed into a story, an evolving piece that carried laughter, sorrow, hope, and triumph in equal measure. She felt herself becoming lost in the music, the outside world fading into insignificance. The whispers and shuffles of the crowd, the sunlight streaming through the windows, even the subtle creaks of the floorboards, all of it disappeared as she focused entirely on the keys. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, guided by years of practice and the raw emotion that had remained untouched for so long. She played not for recognition or applause, but for the sheer joy of creation, the fulfillment of expressing something that had been quietly waiting inside her. The audience was captivated. Some leaned forward, drawn in by the unexpected complexity and beauty of the piece. Others had tears in their eyes, moved by the depth of feeling that radiated from her performance. There was a collective sense of awe, a shared understanding that they were witnessing something special, something that went beyond mere skill. She noticed the subtle changes in their expressions, the way they responded to each shift in melody, and it gave her a quiet satisfaction. She was no longer just performing. She was connecting, sharing a part of herself that had been hidden for so long. She paused briefly, letting a single note linger in the air before continuing. The silence was almost sacred, giving weight to what had just been played in anticipation for what was to come. In that moment, she felt a deep connection to her own past, to the years of quiet practice and dedication that had brought her here. She realized that every challenge, every setback, had contributed to this moment, shaping her into the musician she had become. The music was a reflection of her journey, a testament to perseverance, passion, and resilience. With renewed confidence, she allowed the music to flow even more freely. Her hands moved effortlessly, blending technical skill with emotional expression. The piece grew in complexity, yet remained natural and heartfelt. Each chord resonated with meaning. Each melody line told a story. The audience was entranced, sensing the authenticity in every note. There was a profound human quality to her playing, a connection that transcended mere entertainment. She was speaking directly to their hearts, communicating something universal through the language of music. As she played, she felt a sense of liberation. The fear and hesitation that had accompanied her to the piano were gone. replaced by a quiet confidence and joy. She realized that this was what she had been missing, the fulfillment that came from sharing her gift with others. The piano was no longer a distant memory or a hidden talent. It was an integral part of her life once more. She allowed herself to fully embrace the experience, letting the music carry her forward without reservation. The room remained silent, every listener fully immersed in the performance. Some had tears streaming down their faces, moved by the raw emotion in the music. Others had wide eyes, captivated by the skill and artistry on display. There was a sense of shared experience, a collective understanding that they were witnessing something rare and beautiful. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had touched their hearts and minds in a way that words could not. The music was a bridge, connecting her to the audience and allowing them to share in her journey. Even for a brief moment, as the piece drew to a gentle close, she allowed the final notes to linger, resonating softly in the room. She lifted her hands from the keys and took a quiet breath, feeling the energy of the audience and the room itself. The applause began slowly, hesitant at first, then growing in strength as people realized the depth and beauty of what they had just experienced. She smiled softly, a mixture of relief and joy, knowing that she had reclaimed a part of herself that had been dormant for far too long. The simple tune had become so much more, a revelation of hidden talent and enduring passion, and it marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life. She sat back down at the piano, feeling the smooth keys beneath her fingers, the familiar weight of each key like a friend waiting for her return. The applause had faded, but the warmth remained. People were still watching, a gentle curiosity in their eyes, and she could feel their expectation without pressure. She wanted to explore the piano more, to show not just a tune, but the depth of what she had been keeping hidden. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself breathe, letting her memories guide her hands. The first notes were quiet, soft, like a whisper to herself. She was no longer playing to meet someone else's expectations. She was playing because she had to, because this music had always lived inside her. Each chord she struck seemed to unlock a memory, a feeling she had tucked away, a fragment of a past life. The room was quiet, as if everyone sensed the difference, a tension that was gentle but firm, waiting for the music to grow. She let her fingers flow naturally, following the path of intuition rather than strict rules. The melody began to rise and fall, slow at first, then gaining subtle energy. She remembered the hours she had spent learning the small nuances of rhythm, the way a note could speak without words. She allowed herself to feel the story behind the notes, and in doing so, the music became alive. The simple tune that had begun as a playful response to a joke transformed into something that carried her heart, her past, her emotions. People were leaning forward, some with eyes wide, others with heads tilted, absorbed by the beauty unfolding in front of them. Her mind drifted to the many times she had played alone, when no one was around to hear. Those moments had been pure, raw, and freeing. Now, she realized, sharing that feeling made it even more powerful. Each note she pressed carried her confidence, her pain, her joy, and she could feel it resonating with the listeners. They were experiencing something personal, even though she barely knew them. She had forgotten what it felt like to be fully heard, to be truly noticed, and now she remembered with a mixture of astonishment and happiness. She began to add slight variations to the melody, small improvisations that made the music her own. Her fingers danced lightly, not with showiness, but with ease and grace that came from years of silent practice. The music stretched and grew, filling every corner of the room. It had a life of its own, a voice that spoke without words. She realized she could no longer stop at just simple tunes. The piano was giving her freedom to explore and express everything she had held inside. She surrendered to it, letting her hands guide the story while her mind and heart followed. The audience was captivated. They leaned closer, feeling the music wrap around them. Some had tears forming, some had smiles of astonishment, and others simply watched, mesmerized. She didn't need applause or recognition. She felt a quiet joy in seeing them feel something real. Music was the bridge between her and them, a universal language that needed no explanation. She let the melody ebb and flow, rising into gentle crescendos and falling into soft lulls, painting an invisible picture that only the heart could see. As she continued, her mind wandered to the hardships that had taken her away from music. Life had been demanding, full of responsibilities and struggles that had made her believe she had no time for passion. But now, with every note, she felt the years of sacrifice fade away. The piano reminded her that her talent and joy had never been lost. They had only been waiting, quietly, patiently, for the right moment to emerge again. And now she was finally letting it out, not just for herself, but for the people who had unknowingly called her to share it. Her fingers moved faster, but with control, weaving complex harmonies and gentle embellishments that seemed effortless. The music became a narrative, speaking of hope, of struggle, of quiet triumphs that often went unnoticed. She could feel the audience leaning in, their attention undivided, sensing that the music carried more than beauty, it carried truth. Every emotion she had bottled up, every dream she had suppressed, poured out through her fingertips, forming a connection that was almost tangible. She thought about the small moments that had shaped her life, the encouragements and doubts, the brief praises and long silences. They all found a place in the music, subtly expressed in rhythm, in tone, in the pauses between the notes. She could hear the subtle shifts in the room, the way the air seemed heavier during certain passages, lighter during others, almost as if the listeners were breathing with her. This was not just performance. It was communion. She was sharing her soul with people she didn't know, and they were responding in kind. The piano seemed to respond to her emotions as well. Each note rang clear and true, resonating with depth that only someone who truly understood the instrument could evoke. She allowed herself to experiment with dynamics, with speed, with touch, letting the music ebb and flow naturally. She was no longer playing cautiously or for approval. She was playing with the freedom and abandon that comes from absolute trust in one's own skill and passion. The audience sensed it, and their quiet awe encouraged her further. She paused briefly, letting a gentle chord linger in the air. The silence was filled with expectation, anticipation, and emotion. Then she continued, building the piece gradually, letting it rise into waves of sound that seemed to fill not just the room, but the hearts of those listening. She felt a connection with every individual present, a subtle understanding that each person was experiencing the music uniquely, yet collectively moved by it. It was a humbling, beautiful feeling, one that she had longed for during her solitary practice sessions. Her hands moved across the keys with precision, weaving melodies that were both intricate and emotionally raw. She felt the rhythm in her chest, a heartbeat that guided her fingers with gentle authority. The music became an extension of herself, an outlet for all the thoughts and feelings she had once hidden away. She realized she had not just returned to music, she had returned to herself, to a part of her identity that she had neglected, but that had never truly vanished. The room was silent save for the piano, the subtle breathing of the audience, and the faint echo of notes that lingered in the corners. She noticed how some people had closed their eyes, letting themselves be fully absorbed, while others leaned forward, captivated by the grace and skill she displayed. She felt a quiet joy in observing their reactions, knowing that her music was touching them in ways words could not. She continued, letting the melody swell and fade, exploring emotions with care and passion. She thought about the simple tune that had started it all, how it had led to this deeper exploration of sound and feeling. What began as a playful response to a casual request had become a profound expression of her inner self. She realized that music had always been her voice, one that didn't require words but conveyed more truth than speech ever could. She surrendered to the moment, letting her fingers move instinctively, guided by the memories, emotions, and skills she had cultivated over a lifetime. As the piece progressed, she began to feel a gentle exhilaration, a sense of liberation she hadn't felt in years. Every note was a release, every chord a declaration that her passion was still alive and thriving. The audience remained transfixed, sensing that they were witnessing something rare and genuine, a true expression of human emotion through sound. The music was no longer simply notes on a page. It was a living, breathing story that unfolded with each passing moment. She allowed herself to smile softly, acknowledging the joy and fulfillment that the music brought her. Her past doubts, her fears, her hesitations, all of it seemed distant now, replaced by the immediacy of the connection she felt with the piano and with the people around her. She was not performing for approval or recognition. She was performing to live, to share, and to embrace the depth of her own being. And in doing so, she found a profound sense of peace. The room seemed to exist only within the music, a shared space where time and worries melted away. She played with fluidity, blending technical mastery with emotional resonance, creating a piece that was as captivating as it was heartfelt. Her fingers danced over the keys, shifting from gentle, flowing passages to bold, resonant chords, each movement deliberate yet free. The listeners were silent witnesses, fully immersed in the beauty and authenticity of the performance. As she neared the end of the segment she had begun, the music softened, drawing to a gentle, contemplative close. She allowed the final notes to hang in the air, a soft echo of the journey she had just taken herself and the audience on. The pause felt significant, almost reverent, as if the room collectively understood the depth of what had been shared. Slowly, she lifted her hands from the keys, taking a quiet breath, savoring the sense of fulfillment that came from giving everything to the music. The audience began to stir, their reactions a mix of awe, admiration, and quiet applause. She knew this was only the beginning, that there was still more she could explore, more to reveal. But for now, she felt a gentle satisfaction, a quiet pride in reclaiming the voice that had always belonged to her. She felt the piano beneath her hands as if it were an extension of herself. The room was still quiet, the air charged with a gentle anticipation that she could almost feel physically. Every pair of eyes seemed to follow her fingers, and yet she was no longer conscious of the audience. The music had taken control, and she let it guide her, weaving melodies that were both delicate and powerful. Each note carried emotion, a reflection of years of hidden practice, of quiet perseverance, and of moments where she had doubted herself. She began with soft, slow phrases, letting the sound flow gently into the room. Each note was deliberate, thoughtful, like a conversation between her heart and the piano. Her fingers moved effortlessly, dancing lightly, yet with precision. She added subtle variations, small flourishes that brought out the natural beauty of the melody. It was no longer just a tune. It was becoming a story, unfolding in real time. People leaned in, captivated, sensing that this performance was something rare, something authentic and deeply personal. She recalled the countless hours spent in practice rooms, alone with the piano, where she had learned to pour her emotions into every key. Those solitary moments had shaped her skills, her intuition, and her understanding of music. Now, she realized, all of that hidden effort was coming to life. The audience may not have known her past, but they could feel the depth of her connection to the music. It was in the rise and fall of the melody, the way certain chords lingered longer than expected, the subtle pauses that made each note resonate more deeply. Her confidence grew. As she explored the piano further, she allowed herself to take small risks, adding unexpected transitions, subtle harmonies, and gentle crescendos that brought the music alive. Her hands moved fluidly, guided by instinct, memory, and emotion. She was no longer thinking about the performance. She was feeling it, living it, and the piano seemed to respond to her touch as if it had been waiting for this moment. The audience remained silent, drawn in completely, sensing the honesty and intensity of what they were hearing. She thought about the times she had doubted her abilities, the moments when life had pushed her away from music, telling her it was impractical, that she had more important responsibilities. But those experiences had not diminished her skill or her passion. They had strengthened it, added depth to her understanding, and shaped her perspective. Each note she played now carried not just beauty, but history and emotion, a testament to her journey. She felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that her years of dedication, even when unseen, were now being recognized in a way that mattered. The melody began to expand, moving through soft, contemplative passages and rising into more dramatic, expressive sections. Her fingers flew over the keys with grace and control, weaving intricate patterns that seemed effortless. She added pauses that allowed the music to breathe, moments where the silence itself became part of the expression. The room felt alive with sound and feeling. Every listener engaged fully in the experience. Some closed their eyes, letting themselves be carried by the music. Others watched, mesmerized by the skill and emotion displayed. She remembered the teachers and mentors who had guided her, who had seen her potential when she could not. Their encouragements, small praises, and sometimes harsh lessons had built the foundation for her ability to create something like this. She played in honor of those experiences, letting the piano speak for her in ways words could not. The music became a dialogue, a connection that bridged her past and present, her own story and the hearts of the listeners. She felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. Knowing that her passion could touch others so deeply, she continued to build the performance, blending technical mastery with emotional depth. Her improvisations were subtle yet powerful, taking the original melody and transforming it into something expansive and captivating. The audience was completely absorbed, some leaning forward as if they could physically feel the music, others with eyes closed, moved to tears. She realized that the piano had become more than an instrument. It was a vessel for expression, a way to communicate without words, and a bridge connecting her inner world to everyone in the room. She played with a mixture of delicacy and intensity, alternating between soft, Gentle phrases and strong, commanding chords. Each transition felt natural, guided by instinct and emotion rather than strict rules. She allowed herself to fully express the nuances of her feelings, creating a piece that was dynamic, expressive, and profoundly human. The audience could sense her authenticity, and the connection was palpable. They were not just listening, they were experiencing, sharing in her journey through sound. As the music progressed, she felt a deep sense of freedom. The fear and hesitation that had lingered earlier were gone, replaced by confidence and joy. She was no longer just performing. She was living through the music, letting it carry her to places she had only dreamed of in private. The piano seemed to respond to her energy, amplifying her expression and adding depth to every note. The room was alive with a quiet intensity, the audience completely engaged in the unfolding masterpiece. She began to explore more complex harmonies, adding layers of sound that created a sense of movement and tension. Her fingers moved swiftly yet gracefully, each note deliberate, each pause meaningful. She allowed the music to tell a story, to evoke emotions that were universal yet deeply personal. The audience could feel the weight of each chord, the subtlety of each transition, and the beauty of the overarching melody. There was a sense of wonder in the room, a recognition that they were witnessing something extraordinary. She paused briefly, letting a single note resonate, giving space for the music to linger. The silence felt significant, almost reverent, as if the room itself understood the importance of what had been played. Then she continued, gradually building the intensity again, adding layers of emotion and complexity. The performance had become more than a response to a simple request. It was a full expression of her talent, passion, and heart. She felt alive, fully present, and deeply connected to the audience and the piano. The melody shifted, moving into a softer, more reflective section. She allowed herself to express vulnerability, subtle sadness, and longing through her playing. The notes were tender, delicate, and full of emotion, touching the listeners in a profound way. She felt the energy in the room shift, sensing the empathy and understanding of those around her. The piano had become a channel for her feelings, and the audience was responding in kind, silently acknowledging the beauty and depth of the music. She gradually transitioned back into more dynamic, uplifting passages, allowing the music to convey hope and resilience. Her hands moved with confidence, each chord resonating with purpose. She felt a sense of completion building within her, a readiness to bring the piece to a gentle close while leaving a lasting impression on the listeners. The room remained fully engaged, every person present absorbed in the music. Feeling the emotions she poured into every note, she slowed the pace, bringing the performance to a soft, contemplative conclusion. The final chords were gentle, lingering, and full of warmth. She allowed the last notes to resonate, feeling the connection between herself, the piano, and the audience. She lifted her hands, taking a quiet breath, savoring the sense of fulfillment and peace that came from sharing such a deeply personal expression. The room remained silent for a moment, as if everyone was holding their breath, reluctant to break the spell. Then, gradually, the applause began. It started softly, hesitant, and then grew in strength, filling the room with a sense of appreciation and admiration. She smiled, a mixture of relief and joy, knowing that the music had touched the hearts of those who had listened. The simple request to play a tune had led to a revelation of hidden talent, a display of artistry that left the audience in awe. She realized that this moment was more than a performance. It was a turning point, a reminder that her passion, skill, and dedication could not be diminished by time or circumstance. As the crowd continued to respond, she felt a quiet pride in herself. The piano had not only allowed her to express her emotions, but had also created a connection with others that words could not achieve. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a belief that her talent was valuable and worthy of sharing. The music had brought her back to herself, and in doing so, it had touched everyone who had witnessed it. She knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would continue to unfold, both for her and for the people whose hearts she had reached through her extraordinary performance. She took a deep breath, feeling the piano keys under her fingers one last time. The room was filled with quiet anticipation, the audience leaning in as if sensing that this moment was different, something that would stay with them long after the music ended. She knew this was the moment to bring everything together, to let the music tell the final part of her story. She closed her eyes briefly, listening to the silence, and allowed herself to feel fully present, fully alive. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, but they quickly grew into confident, flowing melodies. She played with care, but also with freedom, letting the music guide her fingers. Each chord seemed to hold a piece of her life, each transition a memory of struggle, joy, or quiet triumph. She felt the rhythm in her chest, a heartbeat that guided her movements, making the music feel like an extension of herself. The audience remained captivated, sensing the authenticity and emotion behind every note. She allowed herself to explore the full range of her abilities. Her hands moved swiftly yet gracefully, weaving intricate passages that were both technically impressive and deeply expressive. She added subtle variations to the melody, gentle improvisations that made the music uniquely hers. The simple tune she had begun with had evolved into a rich, emotional composition that conveyed more than words ever could. The room felt alive, every person present absorbed in the beauty and power of the performance. Her mind drifted to the moments that had shaped her journey, the teachers, mentors, and quiet friends who had encouraged her, the times she had doubted herself, and the periods of struggle that had seemed overwhelming. All of it found a place in the music, subtly expressed through rhythm, tone, and pauses. She felt a profound connection to her past and present, as if the piano had become a bridge between her experiences and the hearts of the listeners. The audience felt it too, their emotions mirroring the ebb and flow of her playing. She began to bring the piece to a gentle climax, allowing the music to swell with intensity and emotion. Her fingers danced across the keys with precision and grace, each note carrying a story. The room seemed to hold its breath, captivated by the combination of technical mastery and raw emotion. She felt a sense of liberation, the fear and hesitation that had accompanied her earlier replaced by confidence and joy. She was no longer performing for recognition. She was performing for herself and for the connection she shared with those around her. The melody shifted to softer, more reflective passages, conveying vulnerability, tenderness, and longing. She allowed herself to express emotions she had long kept hidden, pouring her heart into every note. The audience was visibly moved, some closing their eyes, others leaning forward, unable to look away. The music had become more than entertainment. It was a shared experience, a moment of connection that transcended words. She felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that her story, told through the piano, had reached them. As the performance continued, she gradually transitioned back into uplifting, hopeful melodies. The music flowed naturally, rising and falling like waves, carrying with it a sense of resilience and triumph. Her fingers moved with fluidity, guided by both skill and instinct. She allowed the music to breathe, pausing at moments to let the resonance fill the room, creating an emotional landscape that enveloped the audience. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, realizing that she had shared a part of herself that had been hidden for years, and that it had been received with genuine appreciation. She experimented with harmonies, layering complex chords that added depth and richness to the melody. Each note was deliberate, each pause meaningful, creating a tapestry of sound that told a complete story. The audience was fully engaged, their emotions mirroring the intensity and nuance of her playing. She could sense their awe, their understanding, their connection, and it gave her a quiet confidence. This was more than a performance. It was a culmination of years of dedication, talent, and resilience. The music began to wind down, moving toward a gentle conclusion. She slowed the tempo, allowing each note to linger, creating a sense of reflection and peace. Her hands glided effortlessly over the keys, each chord resonating with warmth and depth. She felt the emotions of the moment, the connection with the audience, and the satisfaction of reclaiming her passion, all merging into a quiet, powerful energy. She knew this was the final part of the story she wanted to tell through the piano. The final notes were soft and lingering, a gentle echo that seemed to hang in the air. She lifted her hands slowly, feeling the last vibrations beneath her fingertips. The room remained silent for a heartbeat, as if everyone was savoring the end of the journey. Then, gradually, applause began to fill the space. It started softly, tentative at first, and then grew louder, more enthusiastic, a wave of appreciation and admiration. She smiled, a mixture of relief, joy, and pride, knowing that the music had touched the hearts of those listening. The audience approached her afterward, offering words of praise and admiration. They were sincere, often emotional, expressing gratitude for the beauty and depth of what they had just experienced. She listened with a quiet smile, feeling warmth spread through her chest. The performance had been more than a simple response to a request. It had been a revelation, a sharing of her true self, a moment that would remain in their memories as well as hers. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The simple tune had led to a full exploration of her talent, her emotions, and her ability to connect with others through music. She felt a sense of completion, not just in the performance, but in reclaiming a part of herself she had neglected for too long. The piano had become a companion once more, a trusted partner in expressing the depths of her soul. She realized that this was the beginning of a new chapter, one where she could embrace her abilities fully, share her passion freely, and continue to connect with people through music. As the room slowly emptied, she remained at the piano for a few moments, letting the silence settle around her. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, a gentle, affectionate touch, a silent thank you for the instrument that had carried her through so many moments of joy, struggle, and growth. She felt a sense of peace, knowing that her music had created a connection, that her hidden talent had been recognized, and that her passion was alive and vibrant once more. She stood, taking a final look at the piano and the room, a quiet smile on her face. The applause, the admiration, the shared emotional journey had left a lasting impression, both on her and on those who had listened. She felt ready to continue, to explore new melodies, new stories, and new ways to express herself through the piano. The performance had been a turning point, a celebration of talent, resilience, and human connection. She knew that her music would continue to touch hearts, as long as she allowed herself to play and share her gift freely.